Well, it's a warm welcome to Paul O'Sullivan on a day that many South Africans are celebrating the victory of Cyril Ramaphosa in the ANC elective conference. Paul, are you celebrating?
Well, I did that last night, Alec. I got off a flight from Moscow at 9 p.m. and I had to wait 20 minutes for a taxi, but I eventually got to where I was going. And I finished off what I started on the plane because I think the day before yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I said to him, I now understand why my children are so excited on Christmas Eve, because really they don't know what Santa Claus is going to bring them the next day. And my friend knew that I was talking about the ANC elective conference. And he said to me, yes, but there's a better example. He said, the father-to-be, his first child is about to be born, and he doesn't know whether it's a boy or a girl, and he's standing outside the maternity ward hoping for a boy. So I got an SMS just as they were closing the doors on the plane from Moscow, and it just said, very simply, it's a boy with an exclamation mark.
Wonderful.
So you can imagine. I really enjoyed the flight from Moscow to London, despite it being 4 hours in a cramped seat.
Well, it has been celebrated by most South Africans. From your perspective, though, the criminal justice system, we've spoken a lot over the last few years about the capturing of the criminal justice system, the way that you've worked to get it uncaptured. With the appointment of Cyril Ramaphosa as the president of the ANC and one would expect of the country, what kind of impact is that going to have?
Well, they spent the best part of 5 or 6 or 7 years, maybe even longer, capturing the criminal justice system. And it's not just these dirty politicians. You have to remember we've got a lot of criminals in South Africa as well. And the criminals that actually started the process of capturing the criminal justice system, the underworld, had started that process probably about 10 years ago. So it was ripe for plucking, in fact, when the subtoids came along and saw, and all they did was they kind of joined forces with the underworld and completed the operation of capturing the criminal justice system. And that included the hawks, the police, the National Prosecuting Authority, the so-called intelligence agencies who have been captured perhaps long before that, and what was left then was a South Africa which had an impotent criminal justice system where the crime lords were ruling the country, and that's effectively what happened. Now, with Cyril Ramaphosa coming on the scene, he's a man of integrity. Of course, he's also got some baggage. They will say there's nobody that doesn't have a little bit of baggage. Even myself, I suppose, I have some here and there, going back into history. But what we have here is a situation where Cyril Ramaphosa, he doesn't need to rob the country blind. He has sufficient wealth, I suppose. And maybe he's going to do the right thing. I was just looking at some of my old scrapbooks, and it was 20 years ago that I was training Cyril Ramaphosa to be a police reservist.
Wow.
Now, yes.
What was he like?
In fact, more than...
What was he like as a reservist? Was he good at it?
Well, strangely enough, there was a company then called JCI. I don't know if you remember it.
Of course I do.
It was Johannesburg Consolidated Investments, and he was involved with that. Of course, we all know what happened to JCI, with or without an involvement from Cyril. But what Cyril was engaged in business by that stage. After the first elections, he decided not to become a parliamentarian, and he went into business, which was probably a smart move at the time because everybody else was eager to become a politician. Now, Cyril and I first met at Wandi's place in Soweto, long before the first elections. In fact, at that stage, we had the what do they call it? The World Trade Center talks. The talks
Codesa.
between Rolf Meyer and his counterpart, I suppose, was Cyril Ramaphosa. And then on the side shows we had people like Eugene Blanche and others, who acted as a kind of a damper. But at the end of the day, we got a constitution, we got a democratic South Africa, and people like Cyril, they played a very important part. And we were having a chat, him and myself and Fivers Khan, and Fivers Khan then was the sort of CEO of South African Breweries. And the Commissioner of Police then was George Fivers. And George Fivers said, we need to get more people involved in policing. And lo and behold, Khan became so-called CEO, if you like, of the police. I don't think that kind of worked out the way they thought it would. And Cyril Ramaphosa, for his party, decided to become a police reservist. And at the time, I was the head lecturer at the Reservist Training Center in Houghton, so I had to train him.
Maya Khan was his name. Shocked. You remember Maya? He was. He went on to be chairman of SAB Miller, and I think he was the CEO before he became. Why do you think it didn't work out? Because it could be a very interesting point for business people who now want to put their hands up and perhaps help in government or in state departments.
Well, yeah, I've seen that for a while. I think if business people want to help, what they really need to do, rather than impose their will on these agencies, is just to say, well, listen, what help can I provide? And is there something that you need that you don't currently have? We managed to get businesses in the center of Johannesburg to sponsor refurbishment of the charge office, if as it was called in those days, of the Johannesburg Central Police Station, which was so dilapidated, it was dreadful. And we managed to get them to do other things which were beneficial to the policing community. So there's always somewhere that businesses can help. But one of the ways they can help, Alec, and I don't like blowing my own trumpet, but we need donations at Forensics for Justice. And Forensics for Justice in the last 2 years have taken the fight to clean up the criminal justice system, back to the leaders of the criminal justice system. And in the process, we've been arrested, we've been criminally charged. Sarah Jane was dragged away from the office one evening. And we've suffered enormous deprivation, but more importantly, we've had to spend a lot of money. And I think in the last 2 years, we've spent over 5 million. And we've had some very nice people donating to Forensics for Justice. But if I tell you the donations to date are less than 300,000 rand, it starts to give you an idea that I've been carrying the cost myself, together with AfriForum. AfriForum have also put their hands in their pockets. But I mean, at the end of the day, we do need some support, and businesses can step forward. And what I'd like to see now is a complete cleanup. We've already seen it started, actually, in the Hawks and in the police. But the impervious barricade to the National Prosecuting Authority, I think, will finally start to be broken down now. And we'll see Sean the Sheep being put out to grass. Or I'd like to see him being put somewhere else, with orange uniform. But let's assume he's put out to grass. Then we need to go after the people that Sean the Sheep has surrounded himself with. Because those people, they know full well what's been going on, and they've been part of the problem, not part of the solution. And we've identified them, and we've written to them, and we've told them, by the way, you guys, you're going to have to face the music now.
Interesting time in the country's history now, Paul. But how do you think it's all going to develop, given that Sean Abrams, the NPA chief, is going to be replaced? Already the courts have said Ramaphosa can do that replacement. That does seem to be almost as big, from a criminal justice perspective, a breakthrough as Cyril's own election.
It's crucial. We've just seen the appointment of a commissioner of police. And I, for one, I'm solid behind this person. John Satoli has got a good background in policing. And I did the investigations into him at least 2 years ago because I wanted to make sure he was clean before I shared certain information with him. And he came up spotless. Now, he's been appointed chief of police. That's a 7-year appointment. Head of the National Prosecuting Authority is a 5-year appointment in terms of the Act. So whoever gets appointed now, you're stuck with him for 5 years, unless you have to buy him off or something like that. So I'm hoping that there will be a proper due diligence done on the person that replaces Sean the Sheep. His appointment was unlawful. I think it's common cause now that he should never have been appointed in the first place. And I don't think he should even go back into any other position within the NPA, because he's been proven to be useless, in fact. And we've made a formal report against him to the General Council of the Bar. Now, the wheels at the General Council of the Bar turn slowly, but eventually they're going to find that he has acted. I'm hoping they will find that he has acted in a manner which has brought the profession of advocates into disrepute. And then he will be unemployed, which he should be. But I think that my concern is all the other people that he's brought in and promoted. And in our opinion, it amounts to corruption in itself, because gratification, as defined in the Act, is not just about being paid money to do things, but being given a position in life or being given promotion. Now, Sean Abrahams himself was promoted to the National Director of Public Prosecutions from an acting position at the so-called Priority Crimes Litigation Unit. He then appointed Tori Pretorius as the acting head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, which has been the acting head for 2 years. Now, why don't they fill these positions instead of having acting heads? Because if they have acting heads, they can move them along quickly if they don't do their bidding. And there are a number of other prosecutors who are not acting heads, but are actually directors of public prosecution in South Africa who are completely unfit for purpose. And we've identified them. They've stood by and watched what's been going on. And now the time must come for them to be cleaned out.
The stakes were very high then at the ANC conference, because the watershed moment has been reached, and it certainly from where you're sitting, the correct decisions have been made. But can we now see further changes within the system, replacement of lots of those who, as you say, have been appointed by the Ziptoid, or those who have been implicated by criminal activity? And you think specifically about the Scorpions. Is it possible that they might be resuscitated? Do they need to be?
Well, history will determine, I suppose, what has to happen and what doesn't happen. The Hawks, if they are properly structured and properly formulated, whether they call themselves Scorpions or whatever they currently call the Hawks, if they're properly formulated and they're not reporting to the Commissioner of Police, at the moment it's very blurred. It's a very blurred. They joined at the hip with the South African Police Service, and the problem is that you see all these things going on which shouldn't have gone on. And I'm not just talking about myself being dragged off a plane, but look at what happened to Pravin Gordhan, and look at what happened with Glynis Breitenbach. Look at what happened with Robert McBride. When you see all these things going on, it's crystal clear that the Hawks were captured. Now, at the moment, there's no head of Hawks. I'm just saying the appointment of that position, because at the end of the day, if you have a good leader, the Hawks will be fantastic. If they're led properly, they can do what they're supposed to do. But what's more of concern to me is what happens to the ANC now. Because if the ANC don't clean up their act, we're going to see a repeat of this in 5 or 10 years' time. And that's not good enough. We cannot ever tolerate a situation like this again. If the punishments that are handed out now in the next 2 to 3 years, and the court cases that will take place. In other words, if the tornado comes along and cleans this badly built structures up completely, we won't see it again. Except my concern if the ANC is still in power. Now, there's a problem there. If the birth that was announced last night was a girl, I think we all agree that there would be no ANC in power after 2019. But it wasn't a girl, it was a boy. So my concern now is he going to be able to bring in new leadership, younger people, because we can't have an ANC run by 75-year-olds with one foot in the grave. We have to have an ANC run by young people. I saw in Austria now, despite his political leanings, we have a 31-year-old head of state. Now, we need to bring some young blood in, and that young blood needs to be trained properly. They have to have ethics and moral standing and moral fiber, because if they don't, we're going to see a repeat of this in 5 or 10 years. Nelson Mandela, God bless his soul, never realized what would happen, after his death. But I think he had an inkling that Zuma getting into power was going to be a problem.
Paul, just from a broader perspective, many South Africans are really sick and tired of the high crime rate. Is it possible now? Is it to extrapolate from the election of Cyril Ramaphosa, given, as you shared that story about him even being a police reservist, is it possible that we can start hoping that something will be done about the crime rate and something concrete will be done to put the criminals where they belong?
Yeah, I'm very positive, Alec. People keep telling me, you've got an Irish passport. You're so lucky. But I've been 30 years in South Africa. It's my home. I've spent more than half my life there. It's where I belong. It's where my roots are and my family are. Now, and my friends, of course. Now, at the end of the day, the problem with crime in South Africa is not insurmountable. It can be fixed, but it cannot be fixed when you have a chief of police who's buying so-called forensic torches for 300,000 rand from a company in Australia that only costs 7,000 rand. So when you have all that money, if we can take the billions of rand that have been squandered in the criminal justice system and now start channeling that money into real forensic services and catching the criminals. The sad part, Alec, these guys were buying women's makeup brushes instead of squirrel hair brushes for fingerprint lifting. So you go to a crime scene and you lift a fingerprint by dusting it with a special dust, and you use a squirrel hair brush for that. To save money, these criminals that were working with Pakani were supplying these type of brushes you buy from Edgar's for putting on your makeup. Now, the problem with that was they were dusting the fingerprints at the crime scene, and when they were putting the dust on, they were actually removing the fingerprint. Well, all that will come to a stop now. And what we will see now is what I call effective detective services. And if we have effective detective services, we can change the clear-up rate of murder from 10% to 90%. And then we'll see things happening. I heard just the other day, I was in Moscow at the time and I saw it on the news. There was a fire in Manchester and a woman and 3 children were burnt to death in the fire. And within 24 hours, the police had arrested 3 people. And the day after that, 2 of them had pleaded guilty in court. So within 48 hours of the crime being committed, 2 people were pleading guilty in court. Now, that's not an impossible situation for South Africa, and it can be achieved. It just needs, we need good leadership in the police. And I have absolutely no doubt that Cyril Ramaphosa will very quickly instill good leadership, not only in the police, but in the Hawks and in the criminal justice system per se. And then we need to clean up our intelligence services, because the intelligence services should have been spending their time looking out for these foreign transnational crime syndicates. And instead of doing so, they've been protecting dirty criminals like the Zuptoids in South Africa.
So if, to put one of my favorite sayings, hope springs, is not being too optimistic right now?
No, absolutely. The good thing is sometimes we have to go down low before we realize that we're at rock bottom. We were at the rock bottom. South Africa, apart from the ravages of apartheid, South Africa has never been at a lower place than it was last week, with courts dishing out orders left, right, and center. And this man, this leader of the ANC, the ex-leader of the ANC, gets up in his opening address at Nasrec and tells everybody, the ANC must stop using the courts. Meanwhile, he's the most prolific court person in the whole of the ANC. He's run off the court every 10 minutes to keep himself out of jail. I think when he goes to prison, the future of the country will look even better than it does now. But right now, for Christmas, I would say all South Africans should have a bounce in their step. and look after themselves at Christmas, because the criminals haven't been stopped yet, but they will be stopped soon.